Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry I had to step out for a moment, but I understand that you all covered a lot, but not everything. So I look forward to just asking a couple more questions, and thank you again for all your help today. Globalization of S&T. This is a challenging area because, after all, we're in the world of defense policy, and we have to be sure that the classified nature of much of what you do is maintained. But we also know that, while I would agree with Secretary Lemnios that the United States is still in the lead, the rest of the world is catching up. And there's a lot of research being done globally that we could benefit from. I was on the plane the other day, late last week, going back to Dayton because I was unable to get a flight into Cincinnati, flying into Dayton, Delta Airlines. And I was on with some of the AFRL scientists, and one had come here on a visa and has a green card now, but there are a lot of folks who you all have benefited from who have been trained, at least in their undergraduate training in other countries, and then come here often to get a graduate degree and then stay and help us. And it also is true that each of you, Dr. Freeman, Ms. Lacey, Dr. Walker, have global outreach. You have offices in Europe, Asia, and South America, as I understand it. So the globalization is already happening, both in terms of folks coming here and you all reaching out. And I just wonder how that's working. Are you able to leverage some of this international research that we wish was being done here on our shores but is not, to be able to help our warfighters? And is that appropriate to do more of that? How do you balance this need for having confidentiality and classified research with the need for us to take advantage of the most cutting-edge research globally? And then finally, is it economically or even under statute feasible for us to open satellite research laboratories in areas of the world where there is a high degree of scientific research going on? I think of parts of India, for instance. And is it possible to have our researchers working side by side with foreign researchers in some of these areas that have defense implications? So if you could just, the three of you and Dr. Lemnios, jump in too, but give me your thoughts on that.
All right, I'll start. We do, in the Army, we have what we call ITCs, or International Technology Centers, located in several places around the world. And we have, each one of those is operated through and primarily through RDECOM, and we have a senior GS-15 or a colonel who's in charge of that area. And then we send researchers over in certain fields and certain areas that we've identified in those regions to spend a year or two participating and looking for opportunities, both from industries in those regions, but also from universities and from local military, research laboratories. And so that's one way we have done that. Usually what happens then is that they identify a technology or they identify a product, and because of their knowledge, they call back to a laboratory or a center and to a colleague in the laboratory or center who is an expert in that area or field, and then they work together to get those people to talk to one another and or to get those products evaluated and looked at. Another opportunity that we have in addition to that is, I think everybody here, we participate in what we call roundtables with other countries. And recently I just got back from Israel, and I have a meeting coming up with 5 countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the U.S., and the U.K., where we get together and talk about technologies and talk about what we're doing, not only in the laboratories, but what the opportunities are in those countries to see technologies, and we share those technologies as well and bring them into our research programs and or into solutions in our acquisition side. So we have those fora and we have those opportunities to do that. One of the things I just did is with these Tech Ds, these challenges, these problems and challenges, I offered to every one of the countries that we were working with in Germany and lots of others. I said, here are the things we're working on. Here are our priorities. What do you have? What do you know about that is in your region or your area that you can come back and tell us about that we can look at that might help us to solve these problems? So I think that starts to get at it. The last piece that I would recommend is that we have scientists and engineers who attend international conferences all the time, and they make these determinations of figuring out what's out there, and they bring it back to their own laboratory, and that is useful because many cases, and I think we can probably, actually I don't have any in hand, but we have many examples of where we have taken some of these foreign either company products and or technologies, and we have incorporated them either in our own research projects or gotten them into some systems. Now, of course, there's a lot of challenge with that because you have ITAR regulations that you have to be careful of. You have classification issues. You have we've got to buy American issues, and so it's complex. But we do a lot already and can continue to do a lot to understand what's out there in the global economy and make use of it the best we can.
I want to hear, if I could, from the other two service S&T folks, but let me just also add another question, I guess, that any recommendations you have ranging from immigration policy, where I assume you have some thoughts, to ways in which we should change any either statutory or regulatory constraints on what Dr. Freeman just talked about, which is this more free flow. Now, you mentioned the 4 countries you mentioned happen to be 4 of our strongest allies in the world, and ones with which we have an unusually strong military relationship and an information sharing relationship. I don't know as much about New Zealand, but it's true with Australia and Canada and the UK. So thoughts on that, Ms. Lacey?
The Department of the Navy has many of the same kinds of activities underway that Dr. Freeman talked to. We do them through our ONR, we call it global organization, and I'd be happy to provide you, for the record, additional information, all the details on the activities that we have underway. One thing, though, that we have had discussions with the Office of Naval Research about is that activity tends to focus very much on the science and technology side of the house and miss the opportunities that perhaps are there on the industrial side of the house. So I want to see a greater connection between the S&T view of the world and the industrial sector view of the world and our warfare centers. So we have started those discussions.
Dr. Walker?
We have a spectrum of activities at AFRL, from basic research to even classified work going on with international partners. We have the offices you mentioned, EORD in London, and then AORD in Tokyo. We have offices now in the South America region as well. The late 90s, early 2000s, I was at AFOSR working on a project with the Russians on plasma physics and hypersonics activities. It was 6-1. It was basic research, and so we were able to have that communication and dialogue. They were the best in the business in terms of plasma physics. As I mentioned, we have this other spectrum of activity, even classified work with partners like Australia and others that we carry on all the time. AFRL is building a relationship with Singapore, which is in a vital part of the world. Just there with Joe Shabika, the executive director, looking at even increasing our activity there at a fundamental science and applied science level. In terms of regulations, we mentioned when you were out an idea for our pilot project in terms of citizenship for service. The lab is interested in looking at how can we take foreign nationals that are in our universities that are really outstanding, who want to work for us, and bring them into the lab for a couple years and get them on a fast track to a green card status and making them one of our employees. So we are interested in a pilot project on that. I'll have to get back to you on what regulation changes we would need to do that.
Mr. Secretary, anything?
I would just simply add 2 comments. Actually, right after this meeting, I'm headed to San Diego to meet with my counterpart from Australia. Part of that discussion is our joint science and technology areas that we have structured, with the Australians. The foreign S&T engagements that we have are really quite broad. They're across the full scope of the 6-1 funding, and they even in some cases move into the acquisition programs. Very important part of the Department's portfolio. But one thing that's changed over the past several years, and you've seen this in the private sector, and we're starting to address it within the Department, research is no longer sequential. It's no longer that you go from basic research through the next stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. All of this stuff's occurring simultaneously. You'll see a researcher at AFRL or at the Army Research Laboratory that is, absolutely at the leading edge on some physical concept that nobody else has seen, that is thinking about the application of that concept and is coupling with a partner elsewhere in the laboratory to quickly transition it. So the sequential model for basic research has changed. The other thing that's changed, to your point, the teams that actually come together to do research it's seldom that a single investigator is developing the lead concept. It really does take a team of people, and in most cases, and the laboratories are great examples of this, that team has to include a user. It has to include somebody that understands the application of that concept in the user space. And that's what's really unique about the laboratories.
Well, thank you all. And my time has expired, but I appreciate you being here, and